Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA Member Doesn't Know the Rules as Well as He Thinks. This story primarily takes place between me and Shitty Neighbor, who is a member of my community's HOA. Sorry if it's a bit long. As a bit of background, me and my 3 roommates moved into a housing community that is basically just a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets that wind through the community. This is important later, with your front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, we quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests during the weekend. Now my roommates and I admittedly have more cars than the average family. Because we usually have to commute for work, we each have one. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can usually only get one car in the garage. When all the parking in all the free spots is full, we just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day Shitty Neighbor come up while my roommates and I are in the garage organizing some stuff and tells us that we can't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment really just made him sound like an ass and wasn't necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know as we just moved in, and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Well, Shitty Neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good. You better not, because I'll be watching." Well, from then on, we did follow those rules. If we parked in front of our garage during the day, we would make sure to move before we went to sleep. This worked out for a while until one faithful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m. he went to head out and his car was gone. Guess who was there though? Shitty Neighbor standing right outside. Immediately he said to my roommates, "Told you, you were going to get towed if you parked here again." SN and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and calls the car lot. Well, it ends up they're closed, so he'll have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They're going to charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it comes out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been an ass to us since we moved in, and even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules, and lo and behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between Shitty Neighbor treating us like shit and the fact that we could get him yelling at his wife every night, not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to say to add to my point that this guy just sucked, I start to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see Shitty Neighbor's garage. I start to take notice of when he parks his car out in front of his garage. For about 2 weeks I noticed that he would come home around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the 3rd week I decided I would begin the revenge. On Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1. After about 10 minutes I gave the tow company a call and said that he was parked in the fire lane and if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it off. About 15 minutes later Shitty Neighbor came out and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd gotten his car. Now it was funny to do this, and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home, but I wasn't done yet. See, this jackass apparently didn't learn the first time, because literally the next day he parks in front of his garage again. What do I do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again, SN come out, realizes his car is gone, yells at his wife and then goes to get it. Now after this time he is a bit smarter and parks in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever it is he does there midday. He does this for about 2 weeks before he decides that it's okay to park in front of his garage again. Well, who is still sitting at their desk every day and notices this immediately? Well, me of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately call the tow company and off his car goes again. And again, this is met with yelling. I wish that this had a more satisfying ending, but after this third time I decided I would stop because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, who he seemed to do most of the yelling at as if it was her fault that he was a dumbass. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1,000. If he hadn't gotten my roommate's car towed, then we wouldn't have ever found that fun little rule. The best part was that a number of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time and they'd never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We have had a number of other encounters that with him in the time since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual HOA that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. Edit. By popular decision I've decided that this story actually won't conclude with me stopping. I've had lots of advice about recording him yelling at his wife and trying to help that situation. I've also been told that I should figure out if he's using HOA funds to pay off these bills. This one may be a bit harder to obtain since we're just renters, but I'll see what I can do. One thing to note is that he has no idea that it's me calling, and I'm trying to keep it that way. I will keep everyone updated with my progress, and if anything new happens. The next story is titled, Landlord. Remove all modifications you made to my yard. But not like that, now I'm going to sue you for destruction of my property. I'm 27 male and live with my boyfriend, 28 male. The house in question was our first place together that we'd been in for 5 years. It was the only place we could afford, and wasn't the most aesthetic when we moved in. It's shaped like a shipping container and not much bigger than one, plus it's surrounded on 3 sides by 2+ story homes, and on the remaining side there is a parking lot for all of said homes which opens onto a major road. In the backyard, there was a tiny shed which fits a staked washer, dryer, and was otherwise a thin strip of dirt the length of the home, boxed in by the shed and the privacy fences of the other homes. Our yard itself was not fenced in. We had to use the front door and walk around the home, then through the parking lot to access the laundry shed. Yard, no back door. The original landlord was very receptive to us making improvements to the house. We painted, refinished the cabinets, tiled the bathroom, etc. In the backyard I built raised garden beds, installed a small pond and bird fountain, as well as other landscaping so that it became a bit of an unexpected oasis. We had an outdoor table and chairs so we could sit out there in the morning and share a cup of tea. As you may have put together, the original landlord sold the home and our lease transferred to the new owner. We had plans already in the works to purchase our first home together, so we only intended to stay to the end of the lease anyway and figured it shouldn't affect us too much. Almost immediately the new landlord began to harass us nearly daily, often about issues entirely out of our control, such as cars being parked in the lot sideways, cars which were first of all our neighbors' cars and were merely slightly crooked, certainly not sideways. Once he showed up at the front door at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday. We had 2 friends over to play board games and have dinner, and he asked, "Are you going to wind up the party anytime soon, boys? Because people are going to get the wrong idea, you know." We did our best to appease the landlord for the remaining months, but it became extremely grating and honestly made me feel like I was being watched constantly. The final straw was when a technician came to fix the washing machine in the shed and the landlord noticed the table and chairs in the backyard. We received an email that evening telling us, yes in all caps, to remove all modifications of the yard. No patio furniture is permitted. Mind you, this isn't even visible from the road, but whatever. So, I responded, just to be sure, apologies for the mistake. To confirm, you would like us to remove all modifications we have personally made to the yard since our move-in date of XYZ? The answer? Yes. Remove immediately at the soonest convenience. You got it, Chief. We were just about in our final month of the lease and preparing to move to our new home. I had planned to leave the raised beds, plants, and an empty pond behind, obviously, but I decided I was going to revert the place to a dirt strip out of spite. So that's what I did. I collected my bird fountain, pump, my fish, the flower bulbs and other plants. I even took the dirt I purchased for the raised beds to our new home. We filled in the pond and made sure to remove all the grass, so it was one sad strip of dirt again. The landlord was extremely angry to find the yard in that state. He was threatening to sue us for destruction of property because we ruined his pond. He tried to keep our security deposit and he did take us to small claims court over the damage. However, we were diligent when we had moved in and had photos of the original yard, plus the email instructing us to remove all modifications of the yard. He tried to say we had done other damage to the home, all of which was regular wear and tear after 5 years of occupancy, which any landlord should expect, and is responsible over basic maintenance for such as repainting. Not to mention we could prove we left the place nicer than it was originally, with approval from the original landlord at the time we did the projects. I'm sure the judge saw though him immediately. He was quite rude and continued to interrupt her, to which she reprimanded him several times. That is to say, we got our security deposit back in full, even having trashed the yard. The next story is titled, "You Don't Move Cars in the Wrong Spaces?" Well, I'll park here then. This happened to me back in early 2015. We just recently made the move to purchase a new EV. At the time the batteries in the EVs were small compared to today and only had around a 60 to 80 mile range. Well, one of our first larger journeys was to a shopping center about 60 miles away. We chose to go to this shopping center as it also was one of the first places to have EV charging compared to other shops, and at the time the charging was still free. So, we hoped to go there, get a free charge while shopping, and then head home with a full battery. Before we set off, we checked the charger was working through its app, and once we were happy we made the journey. When we arrived, we found where the chargers were placed and ran into our issue. They were working fine, but they were fully blocked by non-EV cars. The bays were marked, but for whatever reason people had parked in them. No worries, I thought, and I went into the center to the information desk to ask if they would announce for whoever to pop to their car to move it. They said they didn't do that and wouldn't. I explained I needed to charge to get home and could they please make an exception. They would not, and so I angrily dropped a hint about them clamping the car or leaving a ticket on it. They said they don't do that either. In fact, the car park was not monitored at all as it was free to park for the day, so no cameras were needed to monitor the car park and there were no car part attendants. So, you don't do anything about incorrectly parked cars? I asked. The answer I got was a firm no from the information desk person, and they really didn't want to be bothered again. As I got back to the car, I saw there was a pavement to the edge of the chargers. The chargers were situated close to the building, but the pavement was in a place that wouldn't be used much when walking around the car park. It also didn't lead anywhere, and more importantly didn't lead to any disabled or parent parking spots. It was also very wide. Which gave me an idea. I then drove to the end of the car park, mounted the wide pavement, made sure there was no one around and slowly drive to the chargers. My cable then reached, I started the charge, locked the car and went shopping. I got back to the car at the end of the day with some form of employee, possibly security but wasn't sure, in front the center looking perplexed at our car parked on the pavement. I just unlocked the car, pulled the cable away and drove off with a full charge. Safe to say the next time I went a year later there were signs on the EV bays stating parking restrictions, there was a fine for non-EVs and they were marked with more paint to make them extra obvious. Oh, and a couple of bollards at the end of the pavement where I mounted the curb. The last story is titled, "Doing a good job does not mean you should get a raise." At my last company I was working as a marketing executive. The team included myself and a senior marketing executive. As time went on, I began to take on more responsibilities to the point that I was doing more than the senior in the team, which they admitted. I spoke to my manager about what I need to do to get to a senior position. She gave me goals and a timeline. I hit those targets. And she would move the goalposts. She did this 2 more times. All the while I was using my skills to reduce costs and improve the projects I was working on. Specifically, I had started to design everything myself instead of using the expensive design agency, saving the company £45,000 per year. I finally set another meeting with my manager to discuss a promotion. I showed her how I'd increased the profit margins of all my projects and all the extra work I'd been doing. Her response was, "Just because you make nice things and do extra work doesn't entitle you to a promotion." I sat there shocked, while she said, "But don't worry, you'll get there," then ended the meeting. She had led me on about a promotion for 2 years. Here is where I started my malicious compliance. I stopped doing anything outside my job description, which included all the design work. Everything went to an agency, the whole team relied on my design work. But when I told them why I was stopping, they were also quite happy to start using the expensive agency. It wasn't until our next quarterly meeting that my manager noticed our profits per project had harshly dropped. When she questioned why we were spending so much, I said, as design is out of my remit, we had to use an agency. She was livid, as she had to present the stats to the CEO that week, who ended up yelling at her in front of the directors. She tried to give me an official warning for sabotaging the team, but a talk with HR cleared that away when they realized it wasn't part of my role. She then told me that I had to sign a new contract with an updated job description. I declined that too. Eventually she asked me what it would take to get me to continue running my projects like I used to, and I mentioned the job title and salary increase. She begrudgingly accepted. I was worried about her being hostile. But then COVID hit and the lady was made redundant. I stayed for a further 2 years before finally moving to a much better place at the start of this year. And as of today, her LinkedIn continues to show that she's unemployed. Thank you for listening.